All right, welcome back to the PMR podcast. My name is Mitch. I'm an alcoholic addict. Welcome back for episode 16.
What's up, guys? I'm Andrew. I'm an addict and an alcoholic, and I'm wicked stoked for today. We have an awesome guest. If you could see the third box on the screen here, this is my friend Dan. Dan and I went to treatment together at Herren Wellness. He arrived a few days after me, and we've been wicked good friends since. So we were really excited when he agreed to come on.
Big time.
So yeah, welcome, Dan.
Yeah, no, thanks guys for having me. Appreciate it.
Yeah, we're super excited to have you on. I've heard a lot of good things about you. And it's just sick. I think this will be the first person that we have on that also identifies as an alcoholic addict. So that's pretty sweet. Also, a younger person too. So, I mean, that's pretty much like our demographic, more or less, kind of. But we did want to ask you the same question that we ask everyone when we have a guest on, and so I'm interested to hear your perspective on it, and you'll see why. When you think of an addict or an alcoholic, what comes to mind
I mean, I
now
didn't think I
and
would.
now and then?
Well, yeah, I was just gonna say that's something that has definitely changed over time. I mean, I hate to admit it, but I think that, for a while in my life, I was the person that was like, oh, alcoholic, addict, whatever, was the person you saw on the park bench. You know what I mean? The typical stereotype of somebody that struggles with drugs or alcohol. And I mean, obviously that's changed as I've gone throughout that similar experience myself. I think now, I mean, I don't know. I tend to think more positively around it now. Maybe that's because I finally have some sobriety under my belt, but I really do look at it as a disease. It affects millions and millions of people, people from all different walks of life, different backgrounds, different demographics, and people in, I know that I can look at somebody now and have no idea they might not have a problem with drugs or alcohol, or they very might have one. Like, you can't really tell all the time. Like, there's, I don't know, there's just many facets to it. But I just think it's just like, I don't know, my whole concept of what it means to be an alcoholic or an addict, being one myself, has definitely changed. And I think it's just, I try to look at it more so now because I am sober, as like the positive things like I think can come from having that type of personality, which I think is a lot if you channel it the right way. I don't know if that was a great answer to your question. I think it was an overwhelming question because, like I just said, like my thoughts on that have probably changed so much over the years. But I don't know, to kind of sum that up. I mean, I can definitely say that, I mean, it's a disease that can affect anyone. I know that it's fatal for most, and I just think that it's something that at least I know I have to work on every day of my life, or else I'm going to end up back where I was, which I don't, I don't want to be there again. So
No,
sorry if
that's a great.
that wasn't very linear, but
That was perfect.
No, nothing we do here is linear.
That's
Don't
right.
worry. I mean, I I kind of half expected that answer. I think a lot of the people we've asked, like when we asked Thomas last week, right, Mitch, like he kind of had the same type of answer. It's almost like before you are intimately connected to the disease, whether it's like a close loved one who you find out has been struggling, or you yourself find yourself in a situation where you're like, oh shit, I'm an alcoholic. Like that idea of like, bottom of the barrel, drinking out of, a bottle that's in a brown paper bag, living under a bridge, like that's kind of the typical stereotype. And that's kind of like part of why we do this, right? Is
Right.
like
Yeah.
all three of us are alcoholics, like, and that just, it goes to show, like, we don't live, as far as I know, we don't live under a bridge, right?
Not
Like,
yet.
so
Wow.
yeah, not
I,
yet.
I was gonna say like pretty much exactly what you're saying. Like based off that the answers are pretty much across the board to what people conceive or think of initially, just plays to how strong that stigma is. Like you were talking about, like what we're trying to combat. That's what we're trying to combat. Like that stigma is like runs deep. It's almost every single person. You know, I had that perspective too. And I'm included in that. I think you did as well, like before getting into recovery and stuff. And that's
Yeah.
how that's how ingrained that is.
I mean, that's part of the reason I didn't want to get in like to recovery. Like that's
Yeah.
part of the reason I didn't think I had a problem, right? Is I was
Yeah.
like, I'm not homeless yet. Like, or I don't, I don't, it's always about like,
Box
the
checking.
next level down. Like I don't, if I'm not homeless or, jobless or whatever, like then I don't have a problem. Um, but yeah, Dan, I love that answer. So this episode is going to be a little bit different, I think, than having other guests on it. I've absolutely loved. I mean, we've had some unbelievable guests. We had, between Greg and Emily and Thomas, and it's been terrific. But it's kind of funny, Mitch, like you mentioned, like Dan, you're our first guest who self-identifies like we do.
Right.
So I think it's going to be really powerful tonight. If you share your story with us, because I think some of our listeners are probably like a little bit tired of hearing what's going on with Andrew and Mitch. And I think you have a really, really, having heard at least a good chunk of your story before, having gone through a lot of the process of treatment with you. I think, you have a lot to say and a message that people that we're trying to reach could really use and learn from. So take it away, buddy.
Yeah, no, absolutely. First I've just thinking about this, it's like me sitting here on a podcast is like, I never fucking thought that I would ever be doing it. And not even obviously not before I stopped using, because I really never thought that I was going to be able to, but also when I first got clean and sober, I was like, all right, well, I'm just probably going to be one of those people that doesn't drink anymore, doesn't do drugs anymore, but I'm not going to be one of those like recovery freaks. But like, I mean, if you don't, if you did drugs and drank like all three of us probably did, and you stop doing that, like first off, it's incredibly hard to stop doing that, but you're going to have to be enthusiastic about something else to give all of that up. And I mean, that can go in unhealthy ways or healthy ways, but with a clear head like all three of us have now, I think we're all smart enough people to realize that, like, yeah, you have to put a little bit into your recovery to be a better person outside of just being clean and sober. And I don't know. That's just like what I don't know. I just like wanted to start with that because I'm just like sitting here thinking, like, honestly, when we were trying to figure out a time that worked for us to do this, and I'm like, fuck this, like whatever. But like, it's good. It's good for me to be doing this because I don't do shit like this that often. And honestly, like, if nothing else, it's a little bit like, at least it's just another way where I can kind of like, be held accountable. Like I'm not, I need that sort of stuff and I probably always will. But it's also just, another thing before I kind of dive into it was how, you're saying that I'm the first one that identifies the way you guys do as an alcoholic addict. And I mean, I think there's people that probably identify as an alcoholic that they're addicts to, whatever. A lot of that is just people's choices on what they actually want to identify as. But I mean, outside of me, having problems with drugs and alcohol, I mean, an addict all across the board, like many of us. And I mean, I've known that for a long time. And I don't know. I just have thought about that a lot lately because I've noticed how, addiction has played a role in my life since I've stopped using drugs and drinking. And it's just been very interesting. I might talk about it a little bit at the end, but I mean, like honestly, like I grew up in a normal family. I mean, I guess maybe it appeared normal. Great parents, mom and dad, they're still together. I have an older brother, he's 2 years older than me. Never had any problems with addiction. My dad had some problems in the past, but not. I think that his was more kind of looked at as, he partied hard kind of thing. But growing up, like, my parents were always very open and honest about certain things, like, if I, about what they did when they were younger in college, whatever, growing up, how things were when they were younger. And I kind of just think that, like, from when I grew up, like, especially like as I got into like high school, I kind of already knew ahead of time before I even started doing it that I knew partying was going to be something that I was involved in. That it was gonna be fun, and that was just what you did and whatever. And I mean, like, I also had this feeling from when I was young, and I don't really know where this came from. Maybe it was from growing up in not, your typical, like, you know, uh, all American house or whatever you want to call it, but that I never really like fit in. And, I've heard people say in meetings and other places where they're like, oh, I always had this feeling from when I was really young, like I was different, whatever. And like, I think that's what that is for me, at least. I always like felt like I had this innate like desire to have to try to fit in, and I don't really know where it came from. But I mean, like, I remember like the first time I ever drank, it was like I was in eighth grade, I think, and I had switched schools. I was really young for my grade, so I grew up in Westwood, Mass, just like 20 minutes outside Boston. And when I was in seventh grade, I got in trouble a lot in school. I didn't care about, like, homework, anything like that. And so my parents put me in Catholic school, this place, Catholic Memorial. It's a school in West Roxbury, and they have a middle school too. So I went there and I repeated seventh grade there. So then I kind of was like the same age as everybody else that I was in school with once I did that. And I remember, like, I met a bunch of new friends. It was great. They were from all over the place. And a lot of them drank like at early ages. And I remember I was going to hang out with some of them, and I hadn't drank before though. So I went home. I would go home from school, like leading up to like the first time I was going to go meet up with some of these new friends of mine, and I would steal my dad's Bacardi and like pour it in a water bottle, and I would just like drink it, like hang around my house till everybody got home, like later on, and like it was fine, nothing really happened, but just to kind of like see what it was like. But it wasn't really even about the drinking; it was more so just about like trying to fit in. And I don't know, I just that it was just kind of like I always remembered that because it was just like I was literally drinking to fit in before I even had ever done it before. It was just a really like, I don't know, that kind of summed up like I was always just trying to, get along with people, make friends, and fit in, even if like it was doing something outside of myself. But I mean, like, after that, like basketball was really important to me. I played like my whole life, and the school that I transferred to had a pretty good basketball program. And like, I did well there, and I started partying hard probably when I was like a sophomore in high school. I mean, I would drink periodically before then, but by the time I was a sophomore, I guess probably just because everybody else was drinking like pretty regularly at that point, I was blacking out most weekends. Stupid incidents with the cops, whatever you want to, you name it. But I was pretty like basketball really was a big thing for me still. And like that continued, but I got away with some dumb shit, but I was fine. And like I'd fuck around with drugs a little bit too. Like I had a lot of older friends. My brother is 2 years older than me, like I said, and I knew a lot of his friends too. And so like, I tried coke in high school. I'd smoke weed. But nothing had really become like a problem. But by the time I was like a senior in high school, I don't really know like what happened. I just remember when I was like 18 years old, I pretty much just kind of like the best way that I can explain it is like I pretty much just was trying to do like the wrong thing at all times. I think at that point I realized like, basketball with the ball was going to stop bouncing like it does for everybody. And it's like, all right, whatever, not that big of a deal. But I didn't really know where I was going to go. I was going to go to college to play, but I was like, is that really all it's going to be? You know, I worked so hard my whole life for this. And like, I think that's really when like my partying like took off. And I think it was also partially because like, you know, anxiety about the future, but also just like when you're 18, you know, you're partying, you're in high school, like, you know, those are some pretty peak party years, I guess. Like everyone's trying to really live it up before everybody goes to school, whatever. You're trying to figure yourself out. It's kind of an awkward age. But all those sorts of things combined, you know, it really just made me drink all the time. I mean, I dated a girl and, you know, we would just drive around in our car and drink like Bacardi Raz the whole day long. Like, you know, I drink every day. I go to basketball practice after I drank. I'd be smoking cigarettes in the parking lot. And it, you know, there were other things that were going on too that weren't necessarily drinking and drugs, but unhealthy behaviors. And I don't know, like I said, it was kind of just, it just seemed like looking back on it, like I was just like really just so lost. And the only way that I could cope was with some sort of negative behavior. You know, I was lucky that I even like graduated high school. Like I remember like sitting in my guidance counselor's office and like this is coming from, you know, someone that had like potential Division II scholarship offers for basketball to basically being like, listen, you better get your grades up or you're not even going to be able to play at any of these D3 schools that really want to because your grades are so bad. And, you know, they were like, maybe you should start looking at community colleges, all this stuff. And, you know, it's wild to look back on that. I mean, I was in a, you know, a rough age, whatever, a tough time in my life, but it's like, I just really couldn't turn things around. But, luckily I graduated and I ended up going to Endicott, which is on, the North Shore of Boston in Beverly, Mass. And, you know, it's a good school. It was a way better academic school than, you know, I would have gotten into. Luckily for basketball, it kind of helped me get in. I was still going to play basketball, which I was, I guess, somewhat excited about. And I was just happy that I had like made it through that chapter of my life, to get away from home, et cetera. But once I got to school, like, and I remember this. I mean, looking back on it now, I mean, maybe me as an individual, I've been immature for as long as I've been alive. And I think that like it took me a lot longer to, you know, be ready for certain things in life, like other normal people are, like a lot longer. And I was not ready to go to college when I was 18. I mean, I showed up to school, all I cared about was drinking, doing drugs, and like making friends and hanging out with girls. And like school and basketball, like were literally such a small priority to me that I mean, eventually, you know, it showed. I made it through my first year, but I was suspended all the time from games for stupid things, for fighting, for getting in trouble drinking. You name it, just like stupid little things that would happen on campus that every time I get in trouble for it, and I'd blame other people. And I'd be like, well, it's your fault. You're walking around drinking mango Rubinoff blacked out the entire day. So, you know, these things happened. And then by the end of my freshman year, I was kicked off the basketball team. There was just one too many incidents. And then, you know, I came back my sophomore year and I was like, I remember my mom and my dad were like really upset. Like, and I didn't even give a fuck at all. I was like, thank God I don't have to do that anymore because it was kind of like, you know, playing Division III basketball. I would love it now probably, but like back then, like, you know, I didn't like waking up at 6 a.m. 4 days a week to go to practice. Like, you know, certain things that kind of had like a Division I commitment. But I just remember them being so upset and I didn't really understand why, but it was because like now there was literally nothing to keep me in check. And, you know, they were right. Like by the first night back of my sophomore year, of the second semester of my sophomore year, like I ended up getting expelled, just with another stupid incident, you know, with something involving drugs and alcohol. And that was kind of the last straw. And then I remember that I went home and I got a job in like an administration office somewhere, and I was, I was drinking every night at home. My mom would like find me on the floor downstairs, pills all day. Um, and I just remember being so depressed. I was like, I can't believe that I got kicked out of school. And it's like, I don't know how the fuck I never even looked at it being like, well, maybe you should stop drinking and doing drugs. It like wasn't even like it didn't even really like register. I mean, it's like one of those things where, I got in trouble and like when I was still at school, like I remember I'd have to go to like certain AA meetings and certain other things and whatever. And none of it ever registered for me. And I just think it's like one of those things where a lot of people have that happen to them and they're just not ready to hear something yet. And, I had a problem from the time that I was 18 and it was just like, it took me a long time after that to even address it. And, I came home and I just blamed it on me basically having too much fun, partying, whatever. And then I was lucky enough where I enrolled at UMass Boston the following fall. And I moved in with one of my good friends I grew up with from home who transferred from Roger Williams to Suffolk. And we lived in Boston and, we had a great time. It was a great area we lived in. Like I went to school, he went to school. We partied a lot, but like I was good for a few years. I was doing things I shouldn't have been doing, but I was kind of able to like skate by. And a thing that I would always do with every big event that would happen to me in my life is I would always be like, no mom, no dad, no whoever, like it's not a big deal, like, whatever, push it under the rug and focus on the next thing that I'm trying to, accomplish to show them that I'm okay and that I'm making positive steps with whatever I'm doing. But, I ended up being able to play basketball at UMass and I couldn't play my first year because there was some rule where I got kicked out of Endicott for disciplinary reasons. So for NCAA rules, you have to sit out a year if you transfer to another school. So my second year there, I was able to play, and then I played the next 3 years. And honestly, like those were probably like times I look back and I was like, you know what, this is awesome. Like I was doing okay in school. Like I would get fucked up all the time, but like it was manageable. I was a little bit older than everybody and I already been to college in some degree. So like I kind of had some experience that I'd learned from the first time around, which obviously didn't work out so well. And it was great. Like I played for 3 years. I was the captain too. And I mean, like I said, like I wasn't, I wasn't totally fucked up yet, but like, I was like snorting Adderall before games. Like I do coke on the weekends. I drink every night, but I was all right. But like when I was graduating, I I was getting a degree from the business school there. And so when I graduated, it was kind of ironically, right as I'm graduating, I kind of realized that I wanted to do something in healthcare. And so like right when I graduated, like I became an EMT. I took like a 6 months course to become an EMT. I did that for 2 years. Then I worked at Beth Israel Deaconess Medical Center in Boston, and like at MGH and the Cancer Center. And like my plan throughout this whole time was to eventually apply to medical school. So I was taking all these prereqs I needed. I was studying for the MCAT. I was making all of these different connections, and like that was my goal. But like over that period of time, my drug use from taking, my own prescription plus 10 other people's worst prescription of Adderall a month, doing coke if I didn't have any, taking these pressed meth pills, and then just drinking every night, really like started to catch up to me. And I think I tried to justify it for a long time because I had all these goals and I was like, if I can just get there and these drugs that I'm doing are going to help me study and perform and whatever. And, I'm working overnights. I have a crazy schedule, whatever. And then if I wasn't working, well, all right, I just worked really hard and studied all day. And now I'm going to drink. But, I mean, I just remember like, and, most people seem to have a point where they realize that their use has changed and like they aren't able to go back from it. And I remember I was working at Beth Israel in Boston. I was working 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. and it was either 3 or 4 nights a week on a rotating schedule. So it changed every week, but it was always overnight. The schedule really kind of fucked me up. And I remember like there was just like not one, if I couldn't go in there and have a bag of blow or at least like 200 plus milligrams of Adderall, like I was like, I wasn't even going to stay at work. And, or I'd have people come meet me outside the hospital and drop shit off for me, or I'd Uber home and get more when I ran out. And then it like, I noticed that got to a point of like, serious concern. And then like, it also had another side of it where it was like, because I was doing so many drugs like that, I'd get out of work at 7 every morning and I'd be so fucking jacked up that I was like, the only way that I'm going to be able to sleep if I don't want to stay up for 3 days straight, like I've done 100,000 times again, is just drink. And so, it kind of started slow. Like I'd leave work and I'd walk far from the hospital and like I'd go to different liquor stores and I'd just slam a pint of Tito's or a pint of Fireball and get on the train and go home. And like, then that turned into a liter every morning. And I'd wake up at 6 p.m. and I'd do the same thing over and over and over again. And I'd show up to work and these people would be like, you look like fucking shit. And I'd be like, yeah, I didn't sleep much today because we work overnight. But it's like, no, like it's because I'm fucking chewing the invisible sandwich all night and drinking until like 1 p.m. every day. And it got to the point where like I knew I had to make a change. And for what I was trying to do with the stuff getting into medicine, I knew that I had needed to get a job in like the research sector of medicine, which I did. But I was like, all right, like for this job, I'll get one that's normal hours, whatever. This will help me get back on track. Kind of like I think a lot of addicts do, where they try to change everything else but the drinking and the drugs, and in hopes that that will kind of help them. And I remember like I got a new job. I started working at Mass General in like the cancer center there, and it was a great job, great people, everything. But my drug use and my drinking, like it just took off. It just got to the point where, I'm not getting out of bed unless I have at least 530s of Adderall. And then if I don't have them in my pocket and I'm not eating them all day long, like I'm probably not functioning. And like, it was the same thing, I'd get out of work. It'd be 5:30. I'd walk to the train. I'd walk home. I'd go to a different liquor store than I did the other day. I'd slam a liter of vodka by the time the night was over. I'd go to bed. And then like I just over time, it just got to the point where, all of a sudden I'm drinking in the mornings. All of a sudden I'm leaving work to drink. I'm drinking the whole entire day. And now I'm spending all my money on pills. I was taking these like pressed meth pills. Like you didn't know what the fuck you were going to get every time you got them. But I would go to the bathroom every 20 minutes to the hospital and snort them. And it was just all day long, everything. And, that went on for like probably like 6 to 8 months before anything happened. But I remember like, just being like, wow, this is like fucking ridiculous. And I kept telling myself, like, I'm going to have to stop drinking at some point, because I was just drinking all day, every day. And if I stopped drinking, I would feel like complete hell. And one time, like the first time it happened, the first time of many, I was like, all right, like, I think it was like, President's Day or something like that, where I had a Monday off, and I had, I drank. I had been drinking for probably 2 months straight, every day, all day. And I was like, all right, like I have tomorrow off, but I'm going to try to start the week off on a good note. Like I'm not going to drink, whatever. I'm going to go work out or something. I mean, I wasn't going to fucking work out, but like, and, I was like, all right, I'm just going to get like a 12 pack tonight. and like a few nips to just taper myself off. And I slammed all 12 beers, like whatever, like drank these nips, whatever, went to bed. And like within like, 2 hours, I'm just violently convulsing in my bed, like hearing shit, like withdrawing like so hard from alcohol. And I don't even think I really knew what was going on. I remember like there were like pipes in my apartment that would like make like little noises, and they'd make a little noise and I'd like freak the fuck out, like all this shit. And I ended up just going to MGH, and I was like, what's wrong with me? And my blood pressure is like 215 over 120 or something like that. And they were like, how much do you drink? And I was like, honestly, I drink a fucking shitload. And they were like, yeah, you're like withdrawing from alcohol like horribly. So, they gave me some Ativan, whatever. They held me there for like 12 hours and I left. And, like that same thing right there happened probably, 10 times. And it just fucked up though, because, not that I didn't know what was wrong. Like I knew I was drinking. Obviously, if you're drinking all day long, every day, that's how that happens. But like, I guess I just didn't know what it would take to get to that point. But after it happened, and when you're in the hospital, like they have people come speak with you, addictions people, all this sort of stuff, and they like tell you about what's going on. And a lot of it was kind of like, I thought I knew, maybe it was just that I didn't want to face it. But I don't know, I was in a lot over my head, more over my head than I thought. And that would keep happening. Like I'd keep going on these binges where it would be like, all right, like I won't drink today, but I'll, then tomorrow I wake up, I got a ton to do for work. I got to study after work. I'm going to eat 300 milligrams of Adderall. And the only way that I can combat that at the end of the day is to drink. And then the same thing would happen over and over and over again. And, it was disgusting. And I mean, like that was like, I guess, peak sickness for me, because it was like after it would happen, like I'd go to the hospital, I'd leave, and I would just start drinking again immediately. And I'd be like, I think it was probably just because there was so much added like shame and guilt from it. I don't really know, or because I just still felt so shitty. Um, but it kept happening over and over and over again. And the thing is like this shit happened to me, and I wouldn't tell anybody really about it. And like my brother knew, my mom knew something was off. My brother knew I was fucked up, but I'd always kind of been like a party or whatever. So they kind of probably thought I was just like, still doing the same shit. But it really escalated to like another point. And I just remember like it happened so many times over the course of like, it was probably like 4, 5, 6 months where there was like one point where I didn't really want to live anymore. I was like, if this is really how it's gonna be, like, then this is I'm just gonna do this until I die then. And I honestly think that if I had kept doing what I was doing, it probably would have happened at some point. I mean, those pills I were doing, one time I went there, they told me there was fentanyl in my system. All the shit I was doing was not leading me anywhere good. And I just remember like one time, and this was towards the end before I finally kind of got caught or whatever and got some help, that I was just walking around, like I would walk around and drink by myself like a fucking loser. It was crazy. I'd be like sitting on benches by myself because I wanted to hide it from like one of my roommates I was living. Like I was never home, but I was always drinking, like all these sorts of things. And I was I was sitting near this like basketball court, like in Somerville where I lived. And I just remembered like I had bought like, I would just buy these huge liters of Tito's and just walk around drinking. And like, I was probably like, I had been drinking for a while, and I was like, I knew that I was fucked again. I'd have to go detox. It'd have to be one of the ones where I'd go and they'd recommend I stay inpatient for 3 or 4 days. And then I was like, this is just what's going to keep happening. And I just remember I was like sitting there, and I just bawled my eyes out. And I don't know like when the last time something like that had happened to me, but I think, and I remember being like, why am I crying? But it's like, how could you not be crying when, you've just been like ruining yourself for the last year and a half, and like you're just like you just don't even know what to do about it. And I don't really know what happened after that, but a few days later, like I woke up in the hospital, and I had been there for a few days, and I remember that my mom was sitting in there with me, and I was like, what the fuck happened here? How she's not supposed to be here? And like basically like she knew that like I was not okay. And then we were supposed to have gotten lunch, I think, the day before, and she put all the pieces of the puzzle together and like figured out that I was at MGH, and she went there, and like that was the first time I was like, oh wow, the gig's up. Like, I guess like they, whatever. Yep, I'm fucked up. Here I am. And I don't know, she finally convinced me to go to treatment. I was like lucky you were a guy that worked at the rehab that me and Andrew both went to. He coached me in school in AAU, like probably when I was 16 and 17. And I had been talking to him throughout like the last few months of me using, being like, listen, I'm fucked up and I don't know what to do about it. And, like that was a big selling point for me getting in there. And he was like, and then I finally went like a week later. And I mean, I even remember when I got out of the hospital, still that last time, I'm already immediately out. I'm slamming beers. I'm like, fuck this, might as well enjoy it if I'm going to go there. And then, boom, it was like, off to treatment of any type of treatment for me. And it was like, a long time coming, I think. I mean, it obviously got worse like it does for most for me at the end, but like, I had problems with alcohol in the past and drugs in the past. And like, it was kind of, it was just kind of crazy. This is like the first time I'm ever even trying to address this in any way, shape, or form. And I'm probably going to end up in a treatment center for a long time. And that's exactly what happened. And it's exactly what I needed. And, I can get into, the rehab, being sober for the first time and God knows how long, and treatment, and learning how to, feel things for once, and having to talk about things I didn't want to talk about, and like you name it, all those sorts of things really fucking blew my socks off. Like I had no idea what I was in for. And I was in treatment for a long time. I think I was inpatient for like 7 months, or close to 7 months. I do think that I really needed that. And I'm grateful that I did go, and like for the people in my life that helped push me there, because I don't think I would have done it myself. And I think I have like almost 19 months today, and it's weird reflecting on all of it, but it's just it's pretty crazy for me to think that I've been living 19 months sober without the ability to kind of just shut the noise off at all, which is really what I was always trying to do. And the amount that in doing that, what you learn about yourself, and what you did and what you can do and everything is pretty incredible. And I don't have time to sum all that up, but it's just like those are like the sorts of things I think about these days, because like, I was missing so much because I was just, I was never really present. And today my recovery is, I don't know if this is the same for many people in Mitch. You have like considerable amount of more time than me and Andrew, but it's like I still think everything I do in life now, because I'm sober, and chances are in the past I was always intoxicated doing whatever it is, everything kind of revolves around my recovery, whether I like it or not, which is a good thing. Like doing something new for the first time sober, doing really anything. And that kind of keeps it fresh for me, which is good, because like, I know that my head wants to tell me to forget about all this sort of stuff, and it's not that big of a deal, and you name it. But I also, like, at the same time, like there's a positive side of it. Like it keeps me engaged. Like I go to NA, and I joined a home group. I got a sponsor, and like I'm really trying to throw myself into it. And like that is something that I would never fucking do before. I'm not somebody that likes to commit to things. I'm never one of those people that can be like all into something. And it helps though. And even from just making connections and people like you guys who have gone through the same sort of stuff. And I mean, I don't know. It's just it's definitely been a wild journey. But I'm happy to keep doing it because I just, I've tried to reflect on how like my incentives for being clean and sober these days have changed. Like it never really was for me in the first place. It was for like my mom.
Mm-hmm.
And afterwards, it was just to keep her and a bunch of other people happy. And there is a small part of me that, and it's taken some time to get there, and it still has more to go. But like, I am doing it for myself a little bit, and like, I never even thought that that was going to be the case. So I don't
That's
know. There's
nice.
little things that keep me going, but yeah, I don't want to keep rambling here, but I just I hope that that was concise.
No, man, that was unbelievable. I mean, I've heard some of it before. And Mitch, you can speak on it too, but there's a few things that, and thank you too for trusting us and for taking the time to do that, right? But I mean, there are a few things that really stick out to me when I hear you share your story. I mean, like the progression is crazy. Talking about like talking about coming on, like doing it to fit in, drinking like Bacardi in a water bottle before you go hang out with your friends, and going all the way through the high school years. Like you're 18 years old, you're going to parties, like things seem all right, things seem good, and you're blacking out and whatever, like, but it's still fun, everything's fun, it's innocent, we're with our friends and we're enjoying ourselves. And then like fast forward, 8, 10 years, and like you said, like in your own words, man, you're like, I felt like a loser, like you were sitting on a park bench trying to hide your drinking from your roommate, like
Right.
because you were so like ashamed and full of guilt. And I don't know, like I obviously, like, I speak from a place of identifying, right? Because I have the same sort of progressive story. Um, just hearing it from you is insane. And the other thing, like, that I can identify with, and Mitch, I think, will probably have something to share on here. I didn't even realize the similarities athletically between you guys in
Yeah, I was
terms of
about to
getting
chime in on that, bro.
kicked off on the teams. But the sports thing too, like when I realized like, oh, the ball's not going to bounce forever, like, and I was like, oh well, what's the point? Like that was a big that was a big turning point negatively for me. Like I totally identified as an athlete up to that point. I was like, this is my goal, this is my whole reason for existing. And when that was taken away from me for one reason or the other, I mean, similar to you, I didn't get kicked off from the team, but I was pretty much politely asked to not return. And when that happened, I was like, well, what's the point now? Like, let's just let loose. Like, I got nothing to hold me back from just using to my full potential here. Um, I mean, honestly, there's so much in your story that's worth talking about. But Mitch, I didn't even put two and together before he started
Yeah,
sharing.
yeah, dude, that was nuts, Dan. I was captivated listening the whole time. Like, bro, our stories are like trippy similar. We started drinking both in eighth grade. My shit started jumping off sophomore year. Same drugs. I was a huge Adderall and Ritalin fiend all through high school and got real crazy in college. Kicked off my swim team the beginning of my sophomore year. Um, and you came back to play at a different school. I came back and ended up swimming at the same school, but did 3 years, back with a different, back with the team and stuff. And thank you for sharing that. I like that was, yeah. I mean, I just feel like everything you were saying, I was just like, yeah, 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 for sure. And um, yeah, dude, it sounds like you're, I don't know how you made it through that shit, bro. Like you got some crazy self-will. I mean, I think that's something that's similar through all of us to make it to this point. But I, I, I mean, that just sounded nuts. Like the levels and stuff like that you're operating on. I mean, I remember having you're talking about like concoctions and you needed to have that concoction for the day. I
Oh,
had
yeah.
same shit, bro. I mean, I would line my shit up and like
Mm-hmm.
that was like my breakfast. And then I'd come back for my lunch, which was another line of shit. And so I related to so much of what you were saying. I wanted to ask, like, when you got kicked off, were there ever conversations before rehab that were with family or friends that were like, hey, we think you might have a problem or something like that?
So, I didn't bring this up. I didn't mention this when I was just talking about it, but like, I remember when I was getting kicked out of school, I had a meeting with like the dean and my mom and my dad. First off, you can probably imagine that was a pretty uncomfortable meeting, but, my dad, like, the dean read the transcript from like the event that happened that got me kicked out. And it was disgusting, just, the language used in it. And like my dad like looked at me afterwards and he was like, I don't think that you can drink. I don't think that you should drink at all. And I was like, yeah, all right, pal. Like, you know what I mean? Like, whatever. But I remembered that like after the fact because like, there are people that just cannot drink. I'm one of them. And he was right. But it was just like one of those things where it went in one ear and out the other. But looking back on it, I was like, I probably should have listened to him back then. But other than that, I mean, I don't know. I had gone to some meetings, but I remember I went to an AA meeting when I got in trouble at school. That they had an AA meeting there, and I was drinking vodka out of a plastic water bottle in the meeting. Like, I don't know. I there were discussions about it with family, but I think like they kind of looked at it more so like my behavior, not like from an addiction standpoint, and like I don't know. I was not an easy one to contain. I didn't want to hear anything from anybody. I was an asshole. So like, especially back then. So I don't blame anybody for not having like a more serious conversation, being like, you need to stop. But I didn't really make that available to anybody, but it was kind of few and far between, to be honest. You would think that more people probably would have been like, wow, like maybe this kid should get some help for his drinking. But no, it didn't really come up that much.
Well, I mean, like part of it too, and like another similarity that I found with you when we were in treatment together too, and in our stories is like you had ways to almost like cover it up, like not cover up your drinking, but like almost like you said in your story, you always had a new goal or a new thing like that you were working towards. So it'd be like, all right, like, yeah, like I know I just screwed up big time. Like I'm in the hospital or I got kicked out of here or whatever. Like, but I'm actually, I'm gonna go into this, this research hospital and I'm gonna get into medical school. I'm taking the prereqs for it right now and I'm working like all these crazy hours. Like I'm putting the work in. So like it pretty much like ignore my faults because look at all the other stuff that I'm doing. Like that's what I always try to do too. Like whether it was with jobs or school or when I was an athlete, I was like, no, look at me, look at all the great things I'm doing. So so that you can ignore or overlook like all the other, all the shit that you know that raises a red flag. the only other thing I would say too is like, and it was similar with me as well, is like I think sometimes it's like family members it's difficult with, like Mitch, like we talked about this with Thomas, like, he kind of said something similar. He was like, listen, I knew something was going on, but how was I supposed to, you know, go up to my brother and say, we need to get you in treatment or you need help. Like, I think it's like whether it's like an absence of information or a lack of understanding or like just a general, like it's difficult to go to a family member and be like, yeah, we need to get help, because like we spoke about with Thomas too, like going to treatment, like me going to treatment was traumatic for my family, like not just me. Um, so there's like a lot of trauma there, and I think there's a lot of the times like family members are trying to keep up like the facade too of like, all right, yeah, my son's fine, like he's keeping, he's checking the boxes, everything's fine, like because it's a scary realization, like shit, like he's not fine, like
Right.
he needs some help, you know what I mean?
Yeah, that's
And
big.
everyone's family like handles that whole thing differently too. And
Definitely.
it's fascinating to see how that happens. I remember my mom, she's got a big family. She wouldn't tell any of her siblings. She has like four siblings. She wouldn't tell any of them. And then I was like, well, why are you hiding this from them? And then one day she decides to call all of them all on the same day and tell them that I, was going to be in treatment for, I don't know. It's just, it does just the way that it affects the family, and everybody's family is different, but it's usually enormous.
Well, it's awkward too, because it's like even friends. I had a friend when I didn't reach out to me for a while after I got out of rehab, and he was like, I didn't know what to say. Like, I love you, bro, but I didn't know what to say to you,
Right.
And
Right.
I think early in recovery, I was resentful for that. But as I've gotten more experience with it and grown and shit, I've understood that it is an awkward position to put family and friends in. It is something that's not talked about. It is stigmatized. It is traditionally it's a stain on the family. I mean,
Mhm.
people would say that. I mean, it's fucked up, but I think you could still find people that would say that.
Oh
And
yeah.
so, I mean, I have one family member that like hasn't really addressed it. They just kind of said like, I'm very proud of you for what you're doing, but it's never been like the word addict or alcoholic or recovery, not saying that. You know what I mean? So I mean, you get support how you get it, but it is definitely weird sometimes. I
Yeah,
did.
bro.
No, my bad.
So I just wanted to say, like, you know, because we just heard a lot about how it was, right? As we get kind of into the last few minutes here, I kind of want to hear like, what's it like now? Like all right, so you spent 7 months in treatment. And obviously I know this, you and I are very close, but like, because right, like on the other side of your story, although you and I call each other all the time and have all sorts of complaints, and Mitch, you're right in that boat too. You and I are always calling each other and hashing it out and figuring out this life thing. But like your life today is worlds apart from what it used to be. Um, for the better. There's a lot of beautiful shit that has happened, I think, in your life, and it's almost come full circle. Like when you were telling me, when you were telling us just now, like about how when you were in the hospital, you'd have the people, like the attendants, come up to you and describe to you what was happening and like the disease of addiction and everything. And I chuckled to myself, thinking about your current, profession.
Right. Yeah. No, I know. Yeah.
So if you want to just go into that, like tell us what life is like for Dan right now. It'd be dope.
Well, yeah. I mean, like when I went to treatment, and I mean, like a million things, the cat was out of the bag, and my family in particular started to figure out all these other things that were going on and everything. And there was a ton of wreckage from that. And I mean, like, it was also like one of those things where me and my goals prior to like going to treatment and finally getting help, those were going to fall apart whether I was doing drugs or not. I mean, like, they weren't really working out for me, obviously, because of my use, but it was kind of like something that I put everything on hold for a little bit because I was like, all right, I'm just going to go to treatment, whatever. I'll figure my life out after I kind of get my act together. But like, whatever happened. And I kind of felt like when I got out of there, it was like square one with like a lot of shit in my life. Like, I lost my apartment. I ended up getting laid off from the job that I had. My kind of idea for a career kind of changed, not really because I didn't really want that to be the case initially, but because people were like, all right, well, listen, you're probably not going to be a physician anymore. So why don't you go ahead and give that one up? And like, there was just a ton that I had to think about. Regardless, like when I got out, I basically was at square one. And, my life is great today because slowly I've started to build small things back. Like I lived in a sober house until like 2 weeks ago. And, I just got my own place. Like, I'm paying for it. Like, I'm proud of it. It makes me feel like a little bit more of a normal person because I'm not living in another house with 15 dudes, which many of them like to smoke crack in. I work a job now, and you know what? Like, I am tired every day, and there's a reason why I like to take 4 million Adderall before I go to work. You know what I mean? But I've just learned that like me doing all these things, even if they're small accomplishments that are happening rather slowly, but they're happening. If I can do them while living the right way, like, it just makes me feel a whole lot better about myself than it did before. But I mean, it's hard because, like, like most, I am definitely somebody that likes instant gratification. And I'm 29 years old. A lot of my friends around my age, even some a little younger, even some a little older, they're having kids, they're married, they have houses, whatever. I'm not there yet. And I have the tendency to compare myself to others. And I've kind of just like had to take a step back and just remind myself that I think the only person I should really be comparing myself to is myself in the past. And like, if I do look at that, like, I've come a long way. And like, I've figured out that, big brain buster here, if I don't do any drugs or drink anymore and I live the right way, like, more of these positive things will happen, but they're just going to take some time. But like, sounds great, like what I just said, but it does take a lot for me to, live healthy, even outside of drugs and alcohol, but not discounting the fact that I can't do drugs and alcohol anymore. And, that's why, like, even I kind of mentioned before how I joined NA. I found a meeting I really liked. I found a sponsor there. I'm close with a lot of people there. And I don't want to go all the time. I don't really like that. Wasn't something I was like dying to do, but like by trying to do the right thing, even if I'm not even sure what my incentive is behind it, like I can slowly feel better about myself. And I don't know. There isn't really many days though where I don't think about drinking. I do think about it a lot, and then it's me not saying, I think it's good for me to at least just tell on myself there, and it's not like I have intent behind it, but I think that maybe that'll slow down over time, but it's just that my disease is still there, or whatever you want to call it. So
Mm. Yeah, that's all very honest, bro. And like, I appreciate you sharing that with us. Like, I'll let you know. I just got 6 years, and I had 2 weeks something happened 2 weeks ago where I had a crazy urge to drink, you know, and that's a truth of that. That's breaking something that a lot of people, when they think of someone in recovery, it's like they're all good now. You know what I mean? Like, they should be skipping down the walkway and yada yada yada, bro. I'm 6 years in, and I wanted to drink 2 weeks ago, but except the difference is this time I told people, I went into action. I shared that immediately and did the necessary things with my sponsor and others to help to try to work through that. You know what I mean? And so that's just a testament to growth in my recovery. I don't think I would have shared that I wanted to drink when I was at a year and a half, like where you're
Mhm.
at. I mean, when I was where you guys were at, bro, I didn't have a sponsor. I wasn't working a program. And I was basically staying sober with like a gun to the back of my head. So
Right.
I think you're in a tremendous spot. Seriously. I think you're doing like exceptionally well. And I can't thank you enough for sharing your story. I did want to ask you though, like you talked about when you went into treatment, because I related to this. I think I also initially went into treatment because there were things set upon me that if I went to treatment and got sober, I could come back to the swim team, I could come back to the school, I would be in better favor with friends and family. And so early in recovery too, for me, I think I did that for others. And it took me a while to get to a point where I was like, no, you deserve this. So I wanted you to, if you feel comfortable sharing more on that, where you're at with that.
No, absolutely. Right. I mean, when I finally kind of got caught, I was like, oh, like, all right, I didn't want to go. I put up a fight about it, but then I was like, you know what? Fuck it. I'll go. I'll keep my family happy. And I mean, like, I think that I was in treatment long enough where towards the end of that, like, I was like, all right, you know what? Like, I can give this a shot. I don't know how long it'll last or whatever, but I like slightly bought into it. But I think that I don't really know when it happened or what happened, but like, slowly over time, maybe through realizing that like, I'm lucky where I have a lot of friends like I grew up with and that are close to me. And like some of them, a lot of them party, a lot of them drink, whatever. But most people in my life have been like very supportive because they knew that it was time for me to get help. And I think me doing it even for other people kind of showed me in turn that like, you know what, why do all these people actually care about me though? And like maybe there is some reason why I should do this for myself. And
Definitely.
like I said, it's not 100% for myself all the time. It kind of ebbs and flows a little bit, but I've just noticed like recently as like different things have happened in my life and I've made some progress in different areas where I'm like, you know what? Like I'm the only one that hasn't drank. So like that and resulting of that it are these positive things coming into my life where I should just keep doing this then. And like I guess I deserve that. And
Mhm.
I never like to make anything about me, you know what I mean? I am always happier if everybody else is happy, but like I don't think you can do recovery for so long if you don't do it for yourself in some way. And so like I've had to like, I don't like, I've had to like give myself a little bit of credit sometimes too, which I don't like to do. You know what? I'm used to beating myself up. And I just think
Mm-hmm.
that in doing so, like, I can realize, well, if you do continue to do this, like some things just might end up the way you want them to for once.
Mm.
Yeah, man. Um, and the other thing too, like that is kind of funny, like for me at least, like that reminded me when you were saying is like when I got sober, I kind of expected people around me to be like, "Oh, really? Like, why? Like, you? Like, what happened? Like, why'd you need to get sober? Like." And when I got sober and I started telling people, they were like, "Yeah, bro, like it's about fucking time. Like, you were a goddamn mess." Like
Right.
they were not surprised that I was at treatment. And when that kind of came to light, all that like self-delusion that like I was all right, you know, it kind of went away. I was like, oh wow, like if other people were really seeing this, then it must hold some water. But yeah, man, it's been. I mean, I can't even begin to describe, how important to my recovery you've been. Like just on the real, like you have at certain points you've kept me sober. Like when all else has failed. when I haven't gotten what I needed from the meeting, um, when my sponsor was busy and couldn't talk, when things are spinning me out, at work, when it's about a relationship, whatever it is, like you have always been honest, you've always been there. And like I think having somebody like that's kind of doing this um with you is so important. And that's just one of the many reasons I'm so grateful for you. And grateful for you as well, Mitch. But it's been an absolute pleasure having you on, and it's been crazy. Like I kind of been sitting here just thinking, like, bro, in April or in May 2021, if you told me like that first couple weeks of treatment with you, like that you're gonna be sitting here at 10:30 p.m. on a Thursday night talking about staying away from drugs and alcohol, I would have been like, you're off your rocker. You're a fucking idiot.
Definitely.
So, it's just a testament. And I love you and I appreciate you, man.
No, I love you too, man. And no, I really appreciate you guys having me on here. This has been a pleasure. And it's almost like one of those things. I feel better after talking for that long about all this stuff. Does this help you guys?
Well, I was gonna say in the
Why do you
beginning
think we
that
do this?
yeah, I was gonna
No,
say in the
this
beginning that it's this Andrew and I say all the time, this is kind of like a meeting, bro. I mean, not even kind of, it really is.
is 100%. Yeah. No. So once again, thanks. I really appreciate you guys having me on here. And Andrew, yeah, like you've been there for me, since day one, literally. And Mitch, I'm sure we'll be in touch going forward too. So, this has been a blast.
Hell
Thanks,
yeah.
buddy.
Yeah, I can't thank you enough, bro. Your story is extremely powerful. I'm very excited to share that with everyone. And I can't thank you enough for coming on and speaking on it. It's like this is exactly what I hope we can continue to share stuff like this. I'd love to have you back on and talk more in depth because I feel like us three could really get after it on all types of stuff. So thank you again so much. And thank everyone that's listening, tuning in. I think we are on 69 subscribers. So whoever's going to be number 70, I don't know who it's going to be, but maybe we'll just hang out with that one for a little bit.
Lucky number 70. Let's go. Big winner.
That's right. All right. Well, thank you, Dan. Thank you, Andrew. I love you, boys. We will keep coming back.
Keep coming back. Thanks, boys.
Later, guys.